Have you ever wondered why Thor's hammer, Mjölnir, always returns to him, and more specifically returns to his hand when in combat or after using it? I think that most people would simply accept this fact as magic of the realms, a convenient power, if you will. And Mjolnir is oftentimes described as a mythical weapon of sorts, and a weapon with supernatural abilities. But the thing with myths is that they very seldom preserve details without having meaning connected to it. So perhaps we are asking the wrong question by asking why the hammer returns. Perhaps the mystery isn't about how Mjölnir returns, rather than why Mjölnir returns in the sagas. Because when we begin to ask that question, the hammer transforms from a weapon to more of a philosophy, if you will. And when talking about the hammer that always comes home, let's go to the beginnings, not so humble beginnings, but to the beginnings of the story. According to the Norse stories, Mjölnir was forged by two master dwarfs named Brokkr and Eitri. And from the beginning, it was described that Mjölnir was supposed to be flawless, the perfect tool to uphold the balance of the realms, so to speak. But through the interference of our favorite Loki, the handle became much shorter than was first intended. And the flaw with the shortened handle persisted, it was remained. And yet, despite this seeming imperfection, if you will, it became the greatest weapon in the 9 worlds, the realms. And Thor could cast it over across the sky, and it was so powerful it could shatter mountains and slay giants and defend both mankind but also the other gods. And after doing that, it always returned to his grip again. And in the myths, this is a pretty central thing, actually. It's a reoccurring thing, but the myths, on the other hand, does not put a lot of time explaining this. It's just something that we need to accept, you know. And perhaps the ancient audience of these stories, they could read between the lines in a different way than we can do today. And perhaps this in-between information is something that has been forgotten. But before we talk about the fact that Mjolnir returns, we have to talk about Thor for a second. This is not a video about Thor, by the way. But the modern day depiction of Thor is Thor as a warrior god. And he's a god of endless battle, if you will. And I think we can thank certain franchises for that, and the 1800s depictions of the Vikings and their gods. He's oftentimes depicted as a giant slayer, for example, and of course as a thunderous hero, if you will. But in the Old Norse worldview, his role was much more complicated and deeper. Thor was the defender of order itself, and he journeys into the lands of the giants, and he confronts willingly forces that are threatening both gods and the humankind. Then he returns. His purpose is not conquest itself. His purpose is the balance of the worlds or the realms. And the thing with chaos, which I have talked about here on Tyrdom quite a lot by now, that chaos cannot be destroyed forever. That's a naive notion. Chaos is always returning in some form or another. And in a sense, chaos cannot be destroyed. It can only be held back momentarily. And that was Thor's role, you could say, in a philosophical standpoint. And the thing with withholding chaos is that every generation must continue that work forever, basically. So let's go back to Mjölnir. Why was it the hammer? That's an interesting question, because there's something quite remarkable about Thor's weapon, I have to say. Why was it the hammer? Why wasn't it the sword, the ultimate symbol for influence, power, danger, control, etc.? Or a spear, like Odin's Gungnir. And by the way, if you haven't seen my Gungnir video, you might like that one as well. The thing with a sword, for example, it exists only to be used for taking people from this life. It's made to kill. And a spear exists to pierce things. But the hammer, on the other hand, it's from the beginning made to build things. It drives nails and it forges irons, and it creates homes. All these things before it destroys enemies. So it's quite a peculiar thing, the hammer, in relation to the swords and the axes and the spears. And I think that the very same tool that is capable of creating all of these incredible things can also bring incredible destruction. So by itself, it's a very, how should we put it? It's a very balanced thing, a balance between a creative force and chaos. So that could be the symbolism behind the hammer itself. I think this matters because Mjölnir appears in many places outside the battlefield. Up until this day, it blesses marriages and it sanctifies sacred ceremonies, and it restores life to Thor's goats in a passage in the Eddas as well, as you might know. So it's much more than a weapon. If we look at the modern pop culture depictions of Thor and his hammer, it's only basically seen as a weapon, a tool for destruction and the mayhem of the enemies. But it should be seen as an instrument that restores order to the realms of the world. And I think there's something to be said about the secret in its return, where we all started this little video. Now, imagine something different. Imagine that Mjölnir never returns to Thor. Thor throws it at the giant and slays the giant, but the hammer disappears from Thor. Someone else picks it up, finds Mjölnir, and let's imagine that anyone could wield it, that we know that they can from the sagas. But just for experimentation's sake, the moment that happens, the power becomes disconnected from responsibility. And the one who unleashes that force would never need to face the consequences of that particular destruction. And that, my friends, is the definition of chaos. Someone that wields the power to create destruction, but does not face the consequences of that. And perhaps this is why Mjölnir returns. Not because it's magical in that sense, but because power never escapes the responsibility of the one who wields it in the end of the day. Every action you make in life returns in some form or another. Every choice you make returns in some form or another. And every consequence returns, and this might just be one of the deepest philosophical lessons hidden inside Norse mythology, actually. Today, in the modern world, we admire strength. We admire influence and authority and power. But perhaps the old stories asked a different question. Not how powerful are you, but rather what kind of person becomes powerful. Those are two very different questions to ask. Because strength without character eventually becomes destruction. And power without responsibility becomes tyranny. That's why we keep our politicians accountable for things, or at least on paper. And the problem has never really been about power itself. The problem is when power becomes detached from responsibility. Mjolnir refuses to allow that separation, and it always comes home to reciprocate the responsibility to the ones who casted or made the action. And responsibility always comes home in the end of the day. Our ancestors, they never imagined artificial intelligence or social media or financial empires that we have today, or even technologies that on the flip of a button could reshape civilizations to come. They, on the other hand, understood something timeless. They understood that every generation creates more and more powerful tools for the generations to come. The question is never whether those tools are powerful or not. The question is whether the people who are holding them possesses the wisdom to carry on. Because every hammer in every generation grows even heavier. And every generation must decide whether they will build with the hammer that they inherit, or if they choose to destroy with the hammer they inherit from their ancestors. And I think perhaps this is why Thor is not remembered merely as the strongest god, He is remembered as the protector of mankind and the protector of the other gods as well. And his strength exists for something, not for domination's sake, but for preservation of the things that we hold dear here in life. And certainly not for ego, which is quite popular nowadays, but for responsibility, a red thread here on Tyrdom. That is why Mjölnir is never really abandoned. It never becomes an independent force in the sagas. It always remains connected to the hand that casts it and who must answer for the use of Mjölnir. Maybe the greatest miracle of Mjölnir was never that it could fly, even though it's a very strong narration to that story, of course. Maybe the greatest miracle is that it always returned to the one who casted it. And if we think about the ancient Norse, that they might again have taught us something that still holds very true up until this day, that power should never travel further than responsibility. And the forces we release into the world, whether it's through words or actions or our choices, they all return to us. It all reciprocates back to us. Just like Mjölnir always returned to Thor. And perhaps that's the true secret to Thor's hammer. And perhaps the old myths were never simply trying to explain the world itself, and perhaps they were trying to help us to live within it rather. Okay, folks, let me know what you think, and let me know if you like my takes on the old myths in relations to learning in the modern world, because I think there's a lot to learn from the old myths. Okay, have a lovely day, and for the old timers here, back to Tyrdom's office. I see you in the next one. Take care. Tyrdom out.